In this video, you're going to hear several ideas that make a whole lot of sense. Practical ideas you can use to grow as a musician. I hope you'll stay and watch it, whether you're a piano teacher or a piano student. I know picking a solfege system is generally the teacher's job, but if you're a student, you also need to know how these things work so you can get the most from your piano lessons. And I'll also tell you a little secret. The information in this video applies to any kind of music lessons, not just piano lessons. I'm Robert Baldwin. This is My Music Genesis. The channel is mine, but the music is yours. We're talking about the best solfege for piano lessons, and it's not what you learned in music school. The first question we need to ask is, what's the benefit of using solfege in piano lessons in the first place? Most of us didn't use solfege in our lessons when we were growing up. Or did we? Because you could think of solfege as any kind of system for naming musical pitches. When I was growing up in Mississippi, I learned early in my piano lessons about the piano key letter names, the music alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can think of that as a solfege system. In fact, many countries use those solfege syllables to name the piano keys instead of the letter names we use in the United States. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. But beyond naming piano keys, is there any further purpose for solfege in piano lessons? Well, I can speak from personal experience and say the answer is a resounding yes. The change in my students has been truly magical since I started seriously using solfege in our piano lessons way back in 2018. And the primary benefit of solfege in music lessons is to facilitate audiation. That's the way you think music. If the goal is to tell students what notes to play, then all you really need are those key letter names. But if the goal is to learn to think music for yourself, then a good solfege system is a powerful tool to help you do that. And if you'd like to learn more about audiation, there's an entire lesson on it in my Music Essentials course, which you can take today for $20, and I'll link that in the description. While it can be challenging for teachers to learn how to use a good solfege system, the benefits for students are so worth it. I've seen improvements in posture, tone, phrasing, accuracy, creativity, you name it. And every single student does better. It's amazing what students can do when they're given tools to think music for themselves rather than just told what to do. And solfege is one of the best tools for that. Turns out, when piano lessons function as obedience school rather than training musical expression, that's stressful. So personally, I'm never going back to teaching music without solfege because it's so useful for my students and their personal understanding. So what are the criteria for choosing the best solfege system for audiation in piano lessons? Well, there are two critical components to think about. Those are context and content. For pitch relationships in music, the word we use to describe the context is tonality. Specifically, major tonality, minor tonality, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Locrian. These are all tonalities that provide the tonal context that's so useful for understanding music. So a good solfege system will provide a way for you to audiate tonality. And if you want to learn more about tonality, I'll be teaching all about it in my next YouTube video that should be out in a week or so. It's sort of a companion video to this one, and it's a complete guide to modes, scales, and keys. Tonality fits heavily into that discussion, so make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already, so you don't miss that. In addition to helping with tonal context, the best solfege system will also have to help you audiate tonal content. Tonal content is your tonal pattern vocabulary. Tonal patterns are kind of like words in music, and the more you know, the more skillfully you can express yourself. Growing your tonal pattern vocabulary is critical for learning to read music, as well as to improvise or compose. Basically anything you would want to do with music, even if you just want to enjoy it more as a listener. You might think of the tonality context as the bucket. Your pattern vocabulary is the musical content that you put into that bucket. And building that vocabulary should be a fundamental aspect of music lessons. And you need to know how solfege works to enable that, just to underscore how useful solfege is and why choosing the best system is so beneficial. The first step to learning tonal patterns is to hear them and to sing them. This is called the aural-oral level of learning because you hear and then you perform. For example, let's listen to tonal patterns in the Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. You've heard this, maybe. The tonal patterns are sort of a harmonic skeleton to music that you can learn to hear. Bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum. But when you're learning tonal patterns at the aural level, there's a limit to how many you can learn, somewhere around 10. More than that, and the sounds just start to run together. So you need a way to organize those sounds in order to get to the next level of learning. And one way you can do that is with the skillful application of solfege syllables. Solfege syllables help you retain a limitless quantity of tonal patterns. Let's just try it. You can sing these same tonal patterns from the Ode to Joy with tonal syllables. That's another name for solfege syllables. And this is called the verbal association level of learning. Mi, so, fa, re, do, mi. Making these verbal associations can be super helpful when you're learning music, but only if you're making the associations with sounds, not words in your theory book. You may already be able to notice how solfege syllables make it easier to memorize patterns. But it's not just that. It also supports your ability to create patterns. For example, now that you know what mi, so sounds like, what if you sang it backwards? So, mi. What if you sang so, fa, re backwards? What about do, mi? So if you sang those 3 tonal patterns backwards, now you've doubled your tonal pattern vocabulary. But that's not the end of the story, because there are some solfege systems that actually make it harder to acquire a pattern vocabulary. But there's one system in particular that supports your ability to grow. So let's look at the 3 most popular contenders: fixed do, movable do, and movable resting tone. The best solfege for piano lessons is going to be the one that helps you the most with audiating tonality and building your tonal pattern vocabulary. The first option we're going to look at is called fixed do. We actually started talking about this system earlier in the video. Fixed do is used in many parts of the world to name the piano keys of the C major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. In fixed do, as the name implies, do is fixed to one piano key, specifically C. And this works fine when you just need to know which piano key to press. You don't need to understand music to press a do. But this system has some serious problems when it comes to audiation. In fact, it really doesn't have any advantages over the letter name system. But let's look at why by applying our 2 criteria. First, does fixed do solfege help you audiate tonality? The answer is yes, but only a little bit. You can easily audiate all the tonalities we talked about, but only in one key each. Fixed do is great if you're only using white keys. With only 7 tonal syllables, you can learn to audiate C major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. And if you just add one black key, you can also get A harmonic minor. And remember, I'll be discussing these tonalities in depth in my next video, so make sure you're subscribed because I don't want you to miss that. But if you want to perform music in any other keyality, fixed do is going to be a problem because you'll need to at least 12 tonal syllables to accommodate the 5 black keys in addition to the 7 white keys. Or maybe as many as 17 syllables, because chromatic solfege syllables, that's the ones for the black keys, use different labels depending on whether the black key is used in an ascending passage or a descending passage. Can you imagine? Do, a deer, a female deer. D, the letter after C. Re, the note that's actually a D, or Ra, even though I just called it D, but this time I approached it from above rather than below. Learning 12 or 17 tonal syllables presents a real barrier for learning tonality. It'd be really nice if there was a system that allowed you to audiate tonal context with only 7 or 8 diatonic syllables. But how is fixed do for your pattern vocabulary? Well, since do is fixed to C, then the syllables for tonal patterns will change depending on what key you play your music in. And that's not ideal for pattern acquisition. For example, if you play the Ode to Joy in C major, then you'll use the same syllables you heard before in this video. Mi, so, fa, re, do, mi. But if you decide to play it in its original key of D major, now those patterns are fi, la, so, mi, re, fi. It's the same music, but you have to learn different labels for the same sounds. That's 12 different sets of syllables. And you can imagine that's not great for learning tonal content. Besides, everybody knows that hot cross buns are made with mi, re, do, not fi, mi, re. That doesn't even mean anything. So fixed do doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of building your tonal pattern vocabulary. And it's not great for tonal context. I'm not saying brilliant musicians can't come from a fixed do system, because they absolutely do. I am saying if you're a teacher with the ability to choose a solfege system to help your students' audiation, fixed do is not going to be it. It's too unwieldy with all the syllables required, and the labels are fixed to piano keys, not musical sounds. Let's see how this compares with another very popular system called Movable DO. And this is the section where I might ruffle some feathers. It might be even more controversial than this video, because for whatever reason, the misleadingly named Movable DO has become sort of the favorite son for music educators and conservatories. But is it great for audiation? I don't know. Let's apply our criteria and take a look. First, how is Movable DO for learning to audiate tonality? To understand that, you need to know how Movable DO works. If you remember, in fixed do, the syllable do is fixed to the C piano key. With Movable DO, the solfege syllables are no longer fixed to piano keys. Instead, do is fixed to the tonic of whatever keyality you're playing in. Tonic is the reference pitch for a piece of music, and keyality is just the letter name of the tonic. So if you're in D major, then D is do. If you're in A flat mixolydian, A flat is do. If you're in B minor, B is do. And as you learned in the section on fixed do, do is a great resting tone for audiating major tonality, because C major only uses white keys, so you don't need to use a lot of chromatic syllables when your resting tone is do. All the half steps and whole steps are set up perfectly to audiate tonic and dominant and subdominant in major. Unfortunately, if you want to audiate music in any other tonal context other than major, you're going to need to start adding a bunch of chromatic solfege syllables. Turns out Movable DO is great for audiating any tonality, just as long as it's major. So while it might sound convenient to have a consistent label for your tonic, when you look at the characteristic harmonies of different tonalities, Movable DO begins to crumble under its own weight. For every other tonality other than major, you're required to translate from major. A tonic chord for major is do, mi, so. Tonic for minor is just like major, but with a lowered third. Do, me, so. Tonic for Locrian is like major, but with a lowered third and a lowered fifth. Do, me, say. But that step of translating from major gets in the way of understanding each tonality as its own thing. It's forcing an intellectual step rather than listening. And that's just asking for problems, like trying to think in kilometers when you've only dealt with miles. It'd be much better if there were a solfege system that made it easier to understand each tonality as its own thing, not major with changes. Or you might be thinking that major tonality is enough to get students started, and they can learn the other tonalities later. But in order to understand tonal context, you have to start with at least 2 tonalities, because we learn by making comparisons. Labeling the resting tone do, regardless of tonality, does not facilitate those comparisons. It obscures them. Of course, if you're a teacher and you're already audiating, it doesn't matter as much. You can put syllables wherever you want if you already understand the sounds. But remember, we're talking about piano lessons. We're talking about how students learn to understand tonal context. And unfortunately, Movable DO is not so helpful in that regard. It's really not a movable system at all because it doesn't allow for labeling and audiating different tonalities. It's still fixed Do, just instead of C, it fixes Do to whatever keyality you're in. While fixed Do allows you to audiate any tonality but only in one keyality, Movable DO allows you to audiate any keyality but only in one tonality, major. What we really need is a system that allows us to easily make comparisons between tonalities with the smallest number of syllables to remember. But does Movable DO have anything to offer in terms of growing your pattern vocabulary? Not so much. It does improve on fixed Do in major tonality, because now you can make your hot cross buns with mi, re, do in any key you want. Mi, re, do, because that song is in major. But for other tonalities, you're going to need chromatic alterations, and that's a barrier. Movable DO doesn't solve the biggest problems of fixed Do, it just brings them to a different part of the keyboard. And that brings us to our third and final contender, Movable Resting Tone solfege. It's a true movable system with all the benefits of Movable DO for playing in different keys and all the benefits of fixed Do for helping you audiate different tonalities with a minimum of syllables. You can probably already tell, but spoiler alert, Movable Resting Tone is the best solfege for piano lessons. MRT, which I just realized looks a lot like Mr. T. Do people still know who Mr. T is? I guess my 80s is showing. Anyway, Movable Resting Tone solfege works by using a resting tone to label each tonality and then allowing you to fix that resting tone to whatever key you want to play in. In this genius and elegant system, you can audiate 7 tonalities with only 7 solfege syllables in any key. Add 1 chromatic syllable and you can also get harmonic minor. So Do isn't fixed to C. It's also not fixed to tonic, regardless of tonality. Now, Do is fixed to a soundscape, major tonality, regardless of key. D is Do. And Re is fixed to Dorian tonality. D is Re. Mi is the resting tone for Phrygian. Now D is Mi. Fa is the resting tone for Lydian. Now D is Fa. So is the resting tone for Mixolydian. D is So. La is the resting tone for minor, either Aeolian or natural minor. D is La or harmonic minor. D is La, and T is the resting tone for Locrian. D is T, So I can play those tonalities in any keyality, and that resting tone applies to the sound. So in fact, you only need 8 chords to audiate all of the characteristic harmonies in all 7 of these tonalities. Four major chords: do, mi, so, fa, la, do, so, ti, re, mi, si, ti. 3 minor chords: la, do, mi, re, fa, la, mi, so, ti, and 1 diminished chord: ti, re, fa. Is MRT popular? No. Is it difficult to learn how to use it? For teachers, yes, if you've only known fixed do and movable do. But is it difficult for students? It's not. It makes perfect logical sense to them. Is it effective? Much more so than the other 2 systems we talked about. And I'd love to see more teachers using it, but I don't think it's going to happen until students and their parents start advocating for audiation. This might seem like such an arcane aspect of music lessons, but what I'm talking about is nothing less than the ability to think music. This is not a widely understood idea in music lessons. And to me, that leads to an unimaginable loss of musical expression in our culture. It may sound sappy, but this is important to me. It's important because I care about music, but even more so because I care about you. Years of music lessons without ever learning to think music is a cost our culture can no longer afford to pay. Anyway, let's go to the criteria. Is Mr. T helpful for learning to audiate tonal context? It absolutely is. In fact, it enables you to encapsulate the entire soundscape of a tonality in that one simple resting tone. With movable resting tone, you learn that if you're audiating a resting tone of re, you're in Dorian tonality. If you're audiating a resting tone of fa, you're in Lydian, and so forth. The concept of a one-syllable resting tone makes it possible to not just label the tonality, but to actually hear it. And what about tonal content? Again, Mr. T comes through. When you learn a pattern in a particular tonality, you use the same syllables for that pattern, regardless of keyality. The concept of relative keys that so many students struggle with becomes simple because it's easy to hear that when do is a certain pitch, la is going to be that relative minor. In other words, when do is C, la is A, or when do is G, la is E. With MRT, students learn to sing this relationship, so it's never confusing. They learn how do and mi are in major and minor tonic triads. Add a so, and you get a major chord. Add a la, and you get a minor chord. Or take Lydian and Mixolydian. Both often use the same chords. With movable resting tone, you can hear that sameness. And you can also hear how the sound changes when the resting tone changes. When the resting tone is fa, you get something that sounds like this. When the resting tone is so, you get something that might sound more like this. But you can also experience the sameness by noticing those same 2 chords have the same sets of tonal syllables. Fa, la, do, so, ti, re. Fixed do and movable do require us to make translations from tonality to tonality. But Mr. T reflects the very way we hear music. Mr. T is music. You may be asking yourself why, with all these benefits, isn't movable resting tone more widely used? And the answer is that Big Do doesn't want you to learn music. Just kidding. I think it mostly comes down to habit. Teachers don't learn it because it's new to them and they don't know about the benefits. MRT isn't usually what they learned in conservatory if they went to conservatory. Conservatories don't use it because Movable DO has been working for them for decades, even though the cultural context has changed and students' needs are different now than they were in 1950. After all, conservatories don't really exist to promote your musical understanding. They exist to promote their musical understanding. But I would really encourage you, if you're a teacher, to think critically and logically about this, because all solfege systems are not created equal. Sometimes I hear teachers trying to keep the peace by telling other teachers to just use the system you're familiar with, which seems like a real abdication of responsibility to me. After all, when you get on an airplane, you'd never hear anyone tell a pilot, just fly it the way you're familiar with. Students literally pay us to teach using the best tools available. These things do make a difference. And when it comes to understanding pitch relationships in music, movable resting tone solfege is the way to fly a plane. The other thing I hear is that we teachers need to be flexible and pay attention to the needs of each student. And I agree with that completely. But the implication is that different solfege systems work with different students. And I don't find that to be the case. Movable resting tone solfege is useful precisely because it addresses your need to audiate tonal context and build a pattern vocabulary. The other two systems we discussed don't have much to offer for audiation. It's not what they were designed for. Mr. T provides us with the flexibility to provide for the needs of each student. If you'd like to experience the benefits of movable resting tone for yourself, I invite you to purchase my Genesis course where you'll learn to play piano by ear and improvise. And right now is a great time to do that because the price will be increasing soon. MRT is the system I use in the Genesis course. And I hope you're not thinking I only made this video to promote my course. I made my course to promote your audiation, but it turns out that audiation and MRT solfege aren't that widely known, so I made this video to promote those things. For me, it all boils down to making the world a better place by making it a more musical place. And I'd like to make it more musical by making you more musical. Thanks for watching, and take care.